and welcome to Studio Notes with me, Sasha DeWitt, and today's guest, Claudia Kennaugh.
Claudia runs Art and People, a Bristol-based art advisory service that offers guidance to artists and collectors. And for me, I think it's this combination that I found so interesting about what Claudia does. You offer coaching and workshops for artists and curation for collectors. And I have to admit, when I first met you, I was very new to the painting world, and I had never heard of somebody who did curation outside of a sort of museum or gallery setting. And I found that really, really fascinating about you. But before we get into that, what I always do and what I always ask artists when they're on the podcast is to tell me a little bit about their journey, how they got into doing what they're doing. And especially with you, I'm quite fascinated. Like, how did you end up doing sort of art advisory for artists and the curation side as well? So what was sort of your starting point with all of this?
So do you want the long version?
Yes, I do.
Excellent. Here, strap in. Firstly, thank you so much for inviting me. This is a real treat to share this space with you. So thank you so much for having me and for that lovely introduction. So the long version is I started out as a musician, actually, and I did that for nearly a decade, and was working in all kinds of manner of different ways in order to make a living doing that. Had my own projects, and then I worked as a session singer as well, and session songwriter. So there's kind of lots of different ways of managing that as a singer and performing artist. All the while, lucky enough to have a family business who run a gallery. And so whenever I was in the downtime from, not having gigs or a show, I would work for the gallery. And I mean, to be honest, it started even before that. Whenever I was, me and my brother used to joke that as soon as we were old enough to hold a hammer, we were in the workshop at the back making, we called it hooks, wire and backing, which was the only thing we were allowed to do. It was like safe enough. So we would put the backing on all of the pictures, and that was our sort of Saturday job. But yeah, more officially, I started to kind of work with them in these kind of down periods. And I was really enjoying the whole environment of kind of being in this dynamic space and, working with the artists and seeing the art coming through. And it was interesting. It kind of caught me at a time where things were becoming more difficult and more challenging for me as a musician. I was not really making enough money to survive. And I also just stopped enjoying it. I sort of, when something is and I'm sure lots of people resonate with this, when something is your passion and your love, the minute it becomes your livelihood, it really changes your relationship to it. And so that's what was starting to happen for me. And so I was unbelievably lucky to have this kind of other avenue that was available to me, because that was how I grew up. And so the sort of less I was doing of music, the more I was of working in the gallery. And I was like, actually, I really love this. And so I kind of made the switch. And decided to put a pin in my career as a musician and move to working full-time for the family. So it was a long road from there. I very much started at the bottom, again, sort of mainly in the workshop and in the office, kind of doing all the admin side of things that my mum really didn't want to do, and sort of learning the ropes of how a gallery ran, essentially. And then as I kind of got, more comfortable with it, started doing more of the artist liaison, and then going out and doing the sourcing with mum, which was honestly the best bit, because my mum and dad set it up in 1980 as a gallery where they would sell artworks by unknown artists. Usually part had already passed away, so they'd go to France and essentially fill a carload of artworks and sell them. And it was sort of this very lucky kind of boom of the 80s where everyone was just buying antiques, and it was a great time. And so mum's got that, she's very much a dealer. So her model has always been to buy as much as possible wherever budget allows. So we have sort of 50% of sale or return, and then 50% of buying arts directly. And because she was born and brought up in Argentina, excuse me, that's where she is from, we would go to Argentina and Brazil, and we would meet loads of artists and buy art and bring it back. And so I was like, I really like this job. All of a sudden it was like, yeah, really piqued my interest even more. And that engagement with the artists, that engagement with their, with their practice and their studio, and it was like everything kind of came together. And I think the reason I feel like it felt so relevant to my journey as a musician is that I felt like I was understanding the artists that we worked with on a deeper level, because I know that struggle. I know what it's like to live off your art. And so I would get very close to the artists that we worked with. And so the more we developed, with the artists we worked with, the more I would nurture them and work with them. And the thing that kept coming up was how little they knew about their own practice, or how that fit into the kind of professional kind of sphere. And so, yes, they could do this amazing work in the studio, but then what happens next? And so artists would come to the gallery and be, have no idea about pricing, have no idea about, how to kind of navigate the work, or what to title the work, or, how to talk about the work. And so that was always in the back of my head, like, what is happening in these art schools? Like, and if they haven't been to art school, then they've even got less of a chance of kind of that awareness. And we definitely didn't exclusively work with people who went to art school. It's very much not the prerequisite. So all alongside that, I was also starting to work more closely with the gallery collectors. And for me, because again, I think because I've come at it from a slightly different angle, the sort of sales side of it is probably honestly my least favorite part, the kind of retail end. And for me, it's much more about connecting people with the work. So if I see someone really engaging with an artwork, that for me is the exciting bit, and I want to encourage that and help that and sort of enjoy that process with them, and kind of allow them to find the piece that really makes them sing. So I was just like, okay, well, what I really love is that kind of nurturing that relationship with how people enjoy art. So that's when I started to kind of branch out a bit and offer this one-to-one service for the gallery collectors, where I would help them to find a piece, because they would often walk in and say, oh, I love art, but I don't really know anything about it, and I don't know what I like, and I've got this space and I've got the bit of money, but I'm not sure. And I was like, okay, now this I can do, this I can help you with, because it's about kind of connecting the dots, and kind of also encouraging people that this is not, you don't need to know anything about art. And I think that is the biggest thing that collectors find. And even to call someone a collector, they're like, oh no, that's not me. It's like, no, like we, since the start of time, have collected things and gathered things and surrounded ourselves with things of beauty. And there's no reason why art should be any different, but it's been given this kind of lauded name of, you have to have a certain amount of money or a certain amount of status to collect art. And it's just nonsense, actually. So a lot of what I do is try and break that down. And so, yeah, that was all happening. But in the back of my head, I was like, but artists need help as well. And I was getting to the point of kind of, wanting to fly the nest. I'd learned so much from working with Mum, and literally everything. I mean, she was the most amazing mentor to me, to be able to understand the business and see how it works, but also how to work with artists and how to work with collectors. And so really, that those years working at the gallery taught me everything. And then there was just this sense of, that is Mum's story and her journey, and I felt like there was maybe a different path for me in a kind of slightly different context. So that's when it all kind of came together. I was like, okay, well, I just, I'll offer advisory for art for collectors. But then there was this thing in the back of my head, was like, but if I'm not helping the artists and I'm not having that day-to-day kind of relationship with them, then this feels really one-sided, like I'm only servicing the collectors. And I felt like that's not enough for me, and it's not enough for the artists. I want to be able to help them on both sides. So it was a bit of a light bulb moment when I was helping an artist do a show out in California, and a lot of the other artists at the fair were kind of sort of saw us and saw us working together, and sort of saw this dynamic that was working out, and were kind of like coming up and asking for advice and all these kinds of things. And I was suddenly like, oh, okay, maybe there really is something here. The universe was definitely sending me a lot of messages about that. And I thought, actually, yes, this is something I can do to help both parties. And it also just felt really really a way of kind of coming full circle, because the more artists I'm meeting at those early stages of development, the more I'm able to offer to those collectors who are, you know, just starting to buy and don't have huge amounts of money, but want to, you know, own an original piece. So that was how the circle kind of completed. There you go.
But I love that. I love that. Something that has always struck me is because I know you work with emerging artists, but also I consider this like emerging collectors as well.
Yeah,
you know,
that's such a
the
nice way of
same
putting
thing,
it.
really.
So true. Yeah, that's such a nice parallel, because I think, yeah, it is about encouraging both sides, and I think it's a great sort of it's great to introduce them to each other, essentially, because they both need each other. So yeah, that's that. Yeah.
And I think that's what works really nice about seeing what you do, because you have knowledge of both sides. And I think for me, that's always been sort of, I've done all of your workshops. And part of that is because when I hear you speak and I feel like, oh, you have all this knowledge and it's like real life. And also for me, it's sort of, it's like you're not, I think when people, sometimes you get like, oh, the art world, and it becomes that, even that phrase alone just fills me with some sort of fear and confusion. And I think it's like you have this background, having worked with your mom with the gallery, doing all of this stuff in what I would consider the art world, but you're very down to earth, and I think very approachable. And maybe that's what a lot of artists like, is that they see that you might be that sort of, they're emerging artists and emerging collectors, and you're sort of that next step to help them become more confident within this world that they might not be confident in. And maybe that world is sort of, it's a fabrication of people saying, oh, the art world, well, what does that really mean?
So true. And I feel like I wish I could put that on my homepage, because that's like, you really like distilled that so much for me in terms of, yeah, my intentions. I really want that to feel approachable, because it can feel so alienating. And I think you're so right. I've always really struggled with that phrase, the art world. And I used to always put into my copy and things, the world of art, talking about navigating the world of art, which I think is so much more you know, so much more inclusive, because I think the art world, yeah, has so many connotations of, you know, if you're not in it, because it's this whole exclusive thing, if you're not in it, then, you know, this week, especially with Freeze Week, is one of those weeks that makes everyone feel really inadequate, you know, for not being involved and invited to things and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, it's, I really try and break that down. So that's really nice that you feel that, and, you know, feel that you've experienced that through the workshops. That means a lot to me.
Well, and I think I'm going to take that phrase, the world of art, and like write it down so that I can use it as well. So that when people are saying the art world, I can just turn it on its head and be like, actually, the world of art, because it's a much broader way of thinking, I feel.
Right. Yeah. Oh, good. Well, let's try and reframe it and put that vernacular into the world.
That's right.
Yeah.
And something else that you mentioned, so I know that you work a lot with sort of emerging artists and sort of self-taught artists. So thinking around this whole concept of the world of art and sort of what steps people can take to become introduced or to become more confident, maybe become more confident within this, what would be some advice you might give to artists who are within that realm?
Yeah, and I think confidence is the one, because that's the difficulty. And so I think just exposing yourself to these situations and making yourself realize that it's not actually as scary as it seems, and actually it can be really fun to get involved. So I think kind of involving yourself in events and showing up to stuff is, it's the most simple, and you know, say simple, sometimes that can be really daunting, but buddy up with another artist and kind of, you know, have a little gallery club where you just go to events and you sort of check in with each other, and maybe have a little group where you share, oh yeah, I'm going to this tonight, you know, who's up for this, and kind of doing it as a group so that it doesn't feel so daunting, and then arriving and just taking it as like a little bit of an artist date, you know, and going and being like, oh, what do we think about this work, and supporting the other artists in that community. Because I think that, from, you know, speaking to galleries who have had been approached by artists actually vouching for other artists and saying, hey, I think you'd really like this artist. So it's kind of supporting your fellow artists, maybe artists that are a little bit further along in their journey than you. That can be a really powerful way of kind of accessing, because they know what it's like. you know, it's probably easier than kind of buddying with the collectors, sorry, the curators and the gallery owners at first. So kind of getting involved with the other artists, because there is that feeling of, you know, they've been there before. So yeah, going to things, you know, also having access so that you have autonomy, so that you're not waiting around for that call from the gallery. It's kind of making stuff happen for yourself is such a game changer, because I always say it's like, you know, if the gallery wants to find you, fine, so we need to show them what we can do. And that could be something as simple as, again, buddying up with a couple of artists and putting on a little collective show somewhere. It could be in a cafe, it could be in a, you know, a small space that doesn't cost a huge amount of money, but create your own opportunity, and then show them what is possible. And, you know, invite people. You know, you've all got a community, you've all got a community, and who has friends of friends. And so that's the place to start. And don't feel like, oh, it's only friends and friends and friends. It doesn't matter. That's how it all begins. And I think if you can demonstrate to a gallery, or even to, you know, to other collectors, that you've kind of got your package together. It sounds awful to put it in those terms, but that is sort of what they're looking for, is somebody who's, you know, got a body of work that's cohesive, is able to, you know, put it on a wall and present it, you know, outside the studio, has thought about their pricing, you know, ideally has a little bit of a community, and albeit that can be small, but it just shows that sort of initiative is really vital.
So getting together with other artists, going to shows together, doing like buddying up, using other artists to get sort of peer mentorship type things.
That can be nice too. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And then creating, maybe doing a show or an exhibition just to show, and also to give yourself that experience. I think every time you hang a show, you get experience, you learn. Like you said, you were in the workshop at your parents' place doing the wire backing on frames, and every artist who's ever hung anything knows what a pain in the ass that is, basically.
Yeah,
and it's like learning all those little things. How am I going to do the framing? How am I going to do the hanging? How am I going to do my labels? So it's like having that real life experience, and then moving forward, and then sort of getting galleries interested from there.
Exactly. And I think you're so right. That practice run is so useful. I did a curating residency at this venue in Bristol, and what was so nice about it was sort of you know, a group show hung in this event space that was also a restaurant. It was sort of a, you know, mixed purpose venue, but what was really lovely was working with artists who'd never showed before, ever. And so the whole process for them was actually a real learning. It was like, oh, I need to like frame this for one, I need to put a title on it, yes, I need to figure out what, you know, what the like basically everything that went into getting that artwork on the wall. And I thought, actually, this is a really nice way for artists to find out what they need to figure out, so that when they do work with people, it's smooth, and it's not like, oh, this person has no idea what they're doing, and, you know, it's slowing things down. Because, you know, to put it as plain as I can, like, time equals money for a gallery. So if they think somebody's kind of gonna take them time, I mean, the amount of times I've had artwork delivered to on the day of a show, you know, at the max of the deadline, without any hooks on the back, like you say, the wire on the back. It's like, well, do you know what, it might just not get hung. And then it's like, so all these things that kind of, if you're able to do that yourself and realize, oh gosh, actually it's really useful if that's done in advance, or, you know, because I think seeing it from the other side essentially is what's really, really useful. And that's why, you know, it's amazing how many artists curate their own fairs now, and, you know, do their own stands. And the big thing that they say to me is like, oh my God, it's so hard. It's so much work. And there is that slight awareness of like how much work is involved, and sort of what the preparation is, you know. And for a lot of artists, that's an amazing way to make a living and to sell, and to kind of bypass galleries altogether. You know, it's not the be all and end all. And I think it's another thing to sort of remind people that there are lots of ways to do this, and that's one way. And I think it's a brilliant way for lots of reasons, because it allows you to focus on the work. It allows you to be in various places at once. It allows you to expand your collector base, all the obvious ones. But there's lots of artists who don't do it that way, and you know, as a result, they may not need to sell as much because they get the full price. You know, and there's lots of opportunities for artists to showcase their own work and sell direct, but it's a slog, and it's like the self-promotion and the marketing side is what is often very challenging for artists. So it's easier if someone else can do your work. But you know, a great thing I see sometimes at the other art fair, there was a great collective a few years ago called Luna Collective, which is a group of emerging female artists, and they got together because it kept, you know, stand costs were lower, and they could sell each other's work. So I went onto the stand and they were talking about each other's work. So it was kind of a great model, and one I'd really recommend for people to do. And now subsequently they've all gone on to do things on their own because they've got more confidence. So that's another way to boost confidence, is to kind of team up with people, take a stand and big up each other's work as opposed to your own. It's a lot easier.
Yeah, it is. It's so much easier to talk about and market other people's work
Right.
and do a really good job. And then when it comes to your own stuff, you're like, well, I don't know what to say.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
But I loved a couple of things. One, I'll be putting in a request for a workshop to I think to talk about like running your own sort of exhibition with a group of other artists, because I think that would be a really great idea. I think a lot of people would be interested, but maybe don't know where to start. So just going to put that out there.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I love that idea for a workshop. Yeah.
And then the other thing I think was, as you were speaking, I was thinking about how a lot of artists, especially self-taught and maybe emerging, are people who they maybe don't, there's never this point where you suddenly are like, I'm an artist. And it's not just about confidence, but it's about thinking of yourself as a professional artist. And so I think a lot of what you've been saying is maybe taking people from this idea of I'm not an artist, or don't have gallery representation, to, okay, well, that doesn't matter. I'm a professional artist, and this is what professional artists do. They learn about every aspect of the creation, not just the making, but also the framing, the hanging, the shows. So I think it's about that idea of us deciding that we're professionals, even when nobody else is sort of validating that, we're validating it for ourselves.
Yeah. Do you know what? You've hit on such a brilliant point, and it's something that I really struggled with when I stopped pursuing music professionally. And people would say, you know, oh, you're still a musician, or you're still doing music. Oh, and I would really struggle with saying yes. I would really struggle with saying I'm a musician. I thought, hang on a minute, this is crazy. Just because I'm not making money from it doesn't mean that part of me stops. And I think an artist is born an artist, and that never changes. And there will be moments where you're making money, the moments where you're not. But I think the professional element of it all comes down to the approach. So it's like, how do I approach this? What is my intention? What is my commitment to this practice? And I think the minute you make that commitment to make it a professional practice, that is the moment it's professional. Not the minute you get your first paycheck. It's that dedication and that mindset. And I think it's that, again, comes with confidence of like, I am able to confidently say I'm a professional artist. You know, anyone who spends and I think this came up in your chat with Anna about the idea of like, oh, if you have a certain amount of time, if you only spend a certain amount of time on your art, you know, you're a hobbyist, and any more than you're professional. I thought that's such nonsense.
I hate when people go on about, oh, I haven't made anything off of my art, so therefore I'm a hobbyist. Like, that will really irk me quite quickly.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
And if you think about like people who study PhD, and a kind of a professional doctorate and an academic, they might make absolutely £0 from that as an academic, but somehow that's okay. They can be a doctor. That should be the same for an artist. An artist should, you know, if it's just about the mindset and the approach and the commitment, I think.
And I think that's lovely. I think that's something that if people can take away, that idea of validating yourself and not necessarily looking to the outside world to validate you, and behaving as a professional, that is the validation enough. A professional is like showing up, taking workshops, finding mentors, doing these buddy dates, going to galleries. All of that is very, very valid.
Great. Yeah, exactly. I think that's it. And I think with so many things, whatever comes within, getting that sense of validation, like you said, from within, which is unbelievably hard anyway for anyone. but I think I read this really nice thing in I don't know if you've read the Rick Rubin book, Creative Act.
I've read some of it, yeah.
Yeah, and he has this thing about, I'm going to paraphrase, but it's the idea that artists have, it's like their emotions and their sensitivity is it's like you have a one layer less of skin, so everything's just closer to the surface. So I think that idea of like, you know, we do absorb things quite a lot more, and so I think it's easier to get kind of swayed or feel impressionable, but the more you can feel sure of your of your value from the core, regardless of the outside world, then yeah, that's the goal. But that's a life's work, I think.
Well, it takes a long time, and sometimes it just takes, again, putting yourself out there and hearing things. I had gone recently on a walk, and I was telling someone I'm an artist, and it's a question artists get asked a lot. Oh, can you make a living doing that? Or it was something around that, like,
that's
oh, are
interesting.
you able to make any money doing that? And it's one of those, it's kind of a pet peeve question. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I didn't ask you about your job, and can you support yourself, and are you paying your bills?
Do you know what? That is so true. You would never ask someone, so like, oh, are you paying the rent with that?
Yeah, like I'm a teacher. Oh, are you able to pay your bills with that? Because you're probably not,
So
like,
true. I mean, it's
different.
really an intimate thing to ask somebody, and people feel like there's this authority with that they're able to ask that. Yeah, it's so true.
I think it's funny because so I guess by putting myself out there and like speaking confidently about myself as an artist and getting used to hearing those questions, so I now can kind of laugh some of this stuff off. Like it just doesn't bother me anymore. And so I think it is developing, like we're very sensitive, but also developing a slightly thicker skin to some aspects of what people are going to say or how they're going to react to what you do. Because for me, it also sometimes comes from a place of ignorance. Like, because I'm surrounded by artists, I tend to think, oh, everybody's an artist. But when I go out and then hang out with people who are not, I mean, most people are not artists, is basically what I discover. And then they have no idea about what I do or how I do it. And so for me, it's like just educating people about, this is what I do. This is what artists do. Not all artists want to make money or need to make money. Some people are doing it for, political reasons. There's so many different reasons why people make art. And it's sort of just having those conversations. And I think it's that thing that you've spoken about, even with collectors, it's making connections between what artists do and how people who maybe aren't artists can engage with us.
Totally. That's actually a really beautiful topic and area to discuss around, the sort of purpose and the drives, I guess, the drivers behind why people make art. And I just met with an artist this week. We had a session, and she very much does not want to go down the commercial route, and it's really interesting because it's like looking for other ways for that art to live in the world. And I think that it's hard at first. You think, well, okay, well, if it's not going to make money, how's this going to work? And I think for a lot of people that, and like that idea of how it can change your relationship to it, how money changes your relationship to it, is very noble to say, actually, I don't want that to enter. I want to be very uncompromising with my art, and I want that to be not kind of affected, I guess, by the fact that this needs to make money. I think there's a sweet spot where, because it's unavailable for most people to spend as much time on their practice and not make some kind of living from it, unless you're very lucky with funding and all the rest of it. But so I think there is a balance to be struck. I don't think it has to be totally one or the other. I think there's a way of of making work that doesn't compromise your intentions and your values, but also sustains some kind of living. And that, I think, is really hard for people outside of that to understand, because I think it's so clear, you sort of, in the corporate world, for example, you have a job, you go to the job and you get paid for your time, and sort of that's it. And I think if you would say to someone, oh, well, you'll do this, but you might make money some months and you might not another, they'd just be like, what? But somehow, I guess, we're just wired differently, in the sense of there's a way of looking at the world that is kind of it's maybe I don't want to compare and say one is more nuanced than the other. I think that's probably a bit reductive, but it's that idea of maybe looking at the way of being in the world, and not everything boils down to how you make your living.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting to have that sort of, also artist journeys aren't linear. So I think when people go into jobs, it can be very linear. There's these steps that you take, but I haven't spoken to any artist, even yourself, who has had a linear path. It's like, I tried this, I did this worked, this didn't work. This is what I want to say. And I think it's very valuable. And like, I run a membership as well. And basically it is that trying to balance nurturing what's at the core of our art, but also understanding that, yes, we would like to make some, like, we do want to support ourselves this way. So it is sort of trying to find that balance of how do you protect what's at the heart of your artistic practice while still going out and needing to, make money off of it. And maybe it's not just selling the art, it might be through teaching workshops, mentoring, other sorts of ways.
Totally. And I love that term, non-linear. I think that's such a beautiful way to describe it, because it it just shows that it's this kind of evolving entity that isn't always a straight line. And I think that that's something to be celebrated. And I think that by calling in other avenues like workshops or teaching, I think actually it's a really great way to engage with parts of your practice, to sort of see things in different lights as well. It's not, I think we learn so much from doing that and passing on and sharing, and what other artists have to say. So I think sometimes being taken out of our kind of studio into perhaps another way of using art in the world and kind of a source of revenue can actually feed back to the work, again, also in a really enriching way, so that it's we need to sometimes step outside of our own perspective, and so doing things in that way, I've heard artists say that time and time again, that they learn so much from their workshops and it kind of feeds back in. So I think non-linear and kind of not being scared of that, because I think there is a bit of a stigma around that, around the idea of like having a sort of different revenue streams, and like workshops maybe being considered to be like, oh, that's a bit of a cop-out. And I just really don't agree with that at all. I think that it's a beautiful way to share your practice in different ways. And even if you have a job that isn't even related to art, I think that's equally as noble, and actually in a lot of ways can be so vital, because it allows your work to evolve organically and not come back to what we were saying before about, oh gosh, it's got to sort of fit, everything I make has got to sell, and that can absolutely crush your creativity. There's a great kind of chapter about that in Elizabeth Gilbert's book Big Magic, which you've probably read, which I just absolutely love. And she talks about the idea of no shame with getting a job, especially at the early stages, to fund that practice and give it the space and give it the kind of remove the boundaries, and allow it to really progress organically. And I think it's again, it's like, goes back to the thing you were saying about being a professional artist. It's like, just because it's only part of your income doesn't make you any less of a professional artist at all.
Because again, it goes back to not necessarily what this other job is. It's about how you behave in your time, in your studio time, within your practice. That's what makes you an artist or not an artist.
Exactly. Yeah, so true. And actually you can be an artist in so many different ways as well. And I think that's again the sort of, we get sort of sold this one version that, and if we think, oh, if we don't fit into that model, then that's not, we're not it. And it can be really liberating when we realize that there's many ways. And I like that way you say way of being, because I think that that's again something that, like you say, you move through the world and come up against sort of a different way of thinking, and it's when you realize, oh wow, I do actually sort of move through life differently, and that's a really lovely thing, because that's what you're bringing to your work. That's my mum always used to call it the artist's essence. And when a piece she connected with, she would always say that's because it's got the artist's essence. And in fact, I think you won't be able to see this, but I've got on my desk, or you'll be able to see it, this little jar of, it's actually got, so it's a little tiny, like one of those little vials with a cork stopper, and it's got in it loads of little things that were gathered by an artist in Argentina called Sofia Neptuno, and she gathered all these pieces because she makes collages and mixed media works, and because my mum always went on about the artist's essence, and so she captured her essence in a little bottle.
I love
she
that.
gave it to me. And it's got bits of collage and bits of paintings that she's cut up.
I love as well, like when people say, well, you have to speak about yourself, you have to like distill what you're going to say, and that's quite distilled because it's a tiny bottle.
It's tiny.
The things that are important to her as an artist, that essence is fit into that tiny bottle, which is really nice to see.
That's so true. That's so true. And I think, you know, distilling yourself down, which is why it's so hard to talk about your work sometimes, because you're like, how do I distill this non-linear, like expansive, evolving thing into one, you know, elevator pitch? It can feel very reductive and very difficult, and that's always changing. But I think that's another thing I often suggest to artists, is that is a conversation, and it doesn't need to, you know, the artist's statement it gets so much kind of anxiety around it, but that statement can continue evolving. You know, that statement, you can keep revising that whenever you want to. It doesn't mean that is written, you know, that it's static. I think that's a nice thing to keep checking in with yourself with that.
Yeah, it's more like a working document.
Right. Yeah, I like that. I like that.
Because as we go along, I mean, I think all these the journey that we take and all the different paths we go down, that's making us richer and fuller as artists.
Yes.
Whereas I used to think about it, there was a time where I was like, oh, that was a failure. I did this, it didn't work. And that was quite a negative mindset for looking at what I had been doing on my journey. Whereas now I'm like, actually, that just makes me richer as a person, richer as an artist. And then when I go to paint, that sort of artist essence that you're speaking of, there's so many things that come into it. And it is this rich history of where I've been coming out in my artwork. And I think that's really crucial, to think everything we do, whether we consider it a success or not, is valuable.
That is so true. So true. I worked with this artist called Mark Pearson for many years, and he's a figurative painter. And he used to say, oh, Claudia, I go and hang out in Peckham for a whole morning. I'm sorry, in Soho, he's from Peckham. I go and hang out in Soho for a whole morning, and I just sit at a cafe and I just watch people. And he's like, that's me working, because that is him gathering, observing. You know, anytime you go anywhere as an artist, because of the way you see the world, you will be gathering inspiration, you know, data, ideas, like, and it might not even be obvious at the beginning. You know, it might just be a walk through the park and you haven't even thought that much about it, but then later on you'll be, you know, making a piece of work and you'll remember the light that was coming through that leaf, or whatever it is, you know. And it's like we are always gathering, and you just never know what that is gonna you never know where that's going to filter in, but it's all valid, like you say. I think that's such a you know, what a lucky thing actually to be an artist, to be able to see the world that way and be able to filter that through to express your work.
And so something else, so sort of similar but a little bit different.
Yeah,
so going on to I was just thinking about the Just Postcards event that you ran last year.
Yes.
And the reason why I wanted to speak about it a little bit is because I know it was a kind of pivotal moment, not just for myself, but for some other artists that I've spoken to. So, for example, I know some people who submitted pieces who, you know, speaking of confidence, like they had no confidence. It might have been kind of the first time they had been submitting stuff. And then their postcards sold, and that kind of gave them that, like, oh, wow, actually, maybe I can do this. Maybe, you know, maybe there is something to this. And then for me, it was, I submitted things that were sort of illustrative based. And I love my animals, don't get me wrong. But as soon as I had submitted them, a bit of me was kicking myself, like, why did I do that? Why didn't I do the abstract stuff that I had been going into?
Interesting.
You know, why would it? So it was like this questioning of, why did I doubt myself? But I loved that this one event that you ran for a lot of people was sort of this pivotal moment in their own journey. And I was thinking about, I wonder if you are intending to run any sort of events, or like what does the future look like with you and Art and People in different workshops or events?
Yeah, I mean, I'm so glad that you brought that up and shared that with me, because I think that it felt pivotal for, yeah, myself and so many of the artists involved. And it's great timing, in fact, because I'm about to announce, I want to do it again this year, basically, and I'm about to announce it probably even next week, that that the call will be open. And I'm really excited because I've got a gallery in Bristol where I'm going to host it in December. So it's really, really exciting. And the thing that was interesting was that a lot of artists said, similar to you, you kind of did things that were different from the practice that you're working on, as a kind of it was a kind of a liberation to do a bit of an experiment as well, because you had these restrictions of the size, the price. So it kind of allowed you to explore. And what's interesting is some of the artists have gone on to then create whole bodies of work based on those pieces, which is really exciting. And that for me was everything, because I was like, wow, if this is like, help to shape your direction, then that's amazing. And if it's helped to give you confidence to sell your work, that is absolutely, that's game changing for me, to be able to do that. So yes, I think I want to exercise the small but very loving platform that I have to enable mostly predominantly unrepresented artists to have that space, and be able to have that exercise trial run, I guess, if you want to put it that way, in order to share that work. So yes, very excited to be doing that again. I'm looking forward to sort of seeing what comes through out of it. I was just amazed at like the enthusiasm from all the artists for getting so involved, because it's asking quite a lot to create an original piece of work to sell for under £50. And I think the fact that we gave proceeds to Food Cycle, I think for a lot of people that allowed it to feel like, okay, well, this is about more than just me. And it was sort of using art to as this really powerful way to raise funds for people in need at that time. And so definitely that element is important. And it's interesting when you think about the value of art and the value of original art, and it should be a lot more. And so it's like an interesting conversation to have, but at the same time it kind of allowed, I know for some artists who would normally sell prints for that price, but they might spend money and time making something, spend about the same amount of money and time making a print and feel really unsatisfied with it, than doing a study and a sketch that then someone that's an original piece. So it was for me it felt really important to show artists also that you're able to sell accessibly priced work that is also original, and I think that there's so much power in that, as opposed to always defaulting to the print as like a lack of confidence thing. So yeah, that's coming up. And then what I would love to do in the new year is to do a showcase exhibition, because I do miss exhibitions. Like I've done a couple of fairs with my mum, the decorative fair, and I've been kind of feeding artists from my community into her gallery, which has been so satisfying for everyone involved. And I would love to do a showcase for unrepresented artists who I've worked with. I meet so many amazing artists at workshops and one-to-ones, and that just feels like I want to create a show where it celebrates that and brings them together and kind of has them as a group, as a collection. I think would be really exciting. So yeah, that would be a fun thing.
It sounds fun. I think it would be really interesting. And especially because you work with, like you say, people who aren't represented and who are quite new, emerging. And I think it's just helpful because you have that knowledge, and then sort of people are learning through you, like, this is
nice.
how to do these things.
Oh yeah, nice. I mean, that's the hope, is to use it as a sort of part of a the mentoring would just sort of come part and parcel with putting on a show like that. And then ideally, the idea is to then invite galleries. I have such a great network of galleries and curators that I know. And so a big part of what I want to do is kind of initiate some introductions so that people can kind of have a bit of a go-between, because it is, it is so hard to make that introduction yourself. And I can coach people into the best possible presentation, the most relevant presentation to a gallery, but it will still feel a challenge because of that kind of artist approaching a gallery. And I'm a firm believer that and there are, you've been to my workshop, what the drill, but it's like a lot of galleries will be a bit stuffy about being approached by artists, but there are lots that aren't, actually. And so I've had many conversations with galleries who say, look, if it's relevant and if it feels like aligned and I feel like they've really thought about it, then absolutely, they're not just going to put it in the junk just because you've written. So it is really worth keeping on doing that, but at the same time establishing relationships is so much easier if you've got someone to put you forward. And it annoys me because I feel like in every other business you can apply for a job without any issues. There isn't that same power dynamic. You can apply for stuff, and I think that's why so many more galleries are doing open calls now, because it's essentially them saying, apply to me in this like organized window, and I think that it's a great way to get yourself on a gallery's radar. And I'm not talking about the big institutions. I'm talking about the smaller commercial galleries and mid-level commercial galleries that are all doing open call exhibitions. It's an amazing way to get on the radar, because you're kind of, it's not like you're disturbing them at a bad time or like catching them at a bad moment. It's like they've asked for it. So it seems crazy not to take advantage of that.
I think from both sides that it can work well, because for them, it's like they might get to see artists who maybe hadn't thought about applying or would never think of approaching them. But also for the artist, it is always a great way to start thinking about your work a little bit differently and thinking about it outside of your studio. And, okay, well, would this fit in with this gallery? And actually you start to do your research as well, especially if there's like a fee for applying to the open call.
I know. Yeah.
You suddenly are like, oh, okay, but maybe we should always pretend like there's a fee so that we do our research, find out about the gallery, think about it, in a much higher level, and then apply, whether it's free or not free.
That's actually really interesting, because I've always really struggled with the idea of fee-based applications, but it's actually nice when you put it that way, when you're like, actually the fee concentrates the mind, and the fee allows you to look at it a bit more seriously instead of just like randomly applying to stuff because you can, because it's free. It's like, okay, well, if it is going to cost money, I'm going to do my research. And sometimes we do need a bit of an incentive to do the right thing. And that is the biggest and most vital part of any gallery presentation, is the research. That's the most important bit. So if a fee, even if it's £5, helps you to like do that, then that is really
I'd like
crucial.
if all the fees were just £5.
It would be great if they were all £5.
Like, focus my mind, but not too expensive, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that you've got options to apply to several. I think when it's sort of up to £40, it just feels like this is just like, this is not okay. It does hurt. It's too much, because then when that puts even more pressure on getting in, and that I don't think is right, because it is so, it is quite arbitrary and can be very political and all these kinds of things. And so I think to put too much onus on the acceptance is also can be really damaging. So the balance is good.
So as we wrap up, I know that you offer sort of coaching for artists, and you also run workshops for collectors. I know framing workshops for both artists and collectors, because framing is such a pain. So if people wanted to get in touch or work with you, what are some of the things that you offer for people?
Absolutely, so with regards to the one-to-ones, I offer coaching on Zoom, so we can meet wherever whatever suits you. Doesn't have to be, most of the places that I'm in are usually Bristol and London, but I do also, so I can do personal in studio sessions in both those places. But I also go, you know, a bit further afield. It's just, I can't go too far, otherwise it's not cost effective for anyone involved. So yeah, it tends to be, if it's in those cities, then we do in person, and outside of that, Zoom is great. And yeah, and then workshops, I run them in person in both Bristol and in London, and starting to think about hopefully moving a bit further afield, outside of those areas as well. So if that's not your city, then yeah, do get in touch and see what's kind of coming up. And essentially, yeah, I mean, I did during lockdown, I did some online workshops, which were great, and they worked really well. I think I've just been so jazzed about doing things in person that I kind of don't really want to invest in that right now. And I think, you know, you've been to them, the sort of power of them is that connection, and sometimes that can be very like group stuff on Zoom can be a bit of a challenge. It can feel a bit more daunting. So yeah, I think, you know, what's really beautiful is I've started to team up with a lot of studio groups, you know, as well as Wimbledon, working with studios that exist, because then you can really learn together as a community, and kind of, you know, you become aware of each other, and you become aware of each other's strengths and how to help each other out. And so I would love to, yeah, engage with even more studios in that way, because, you know, it's affordable for artists, but it's also about nurturing those communities, because I think that it's so solitary being an artist. So if you are able to access, you know, these kind of periodical sessions where you come together and form stronger bonds with your studio, you know, neighbors, then that's vital to me. So yeah, there's a bunch of things on the website, and you can get in touch if you have any questions about the one-to-one coaching. I offer a 15-minute free call, so you can book that online, and we can just have a chat and see what you're looking for, and go from there.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Claudia. It's been
Thank
really
you.
wonderful chatting with you.
Oh, me too. I sort of forgot we were recording and just like hanging out and chatting, which is really nice. And thank you for all your lovely questions, and kind of taking it outside, you know, taking it a little bit further afield, you know, in terms of like, yeah, philosophically, I really enjoyed that. So it'd be nice to chat to you more about that, Sasha. Thank you for having me, and thank you for doing what you do. I think it's great, you know, in terms of confidence building, and it's great to invite artists to do this, because it you know, it allows them to kind of, you know, kind of breathe into their story, and kind of feel like quite empowered with that. So I think I think Studio Notes is great.
Well, and I love seeing the connections that all artists have. You know, I've interviewed self-taught and ones who've gone on to get MAs, but we all basically have these really crazy, windy journeys. And that's what I think, that people recognizing that actually nobody's having that linear journey. It's always been winding. Yeah.
That's so true. That's really comforting, isn't it?
It is, for me and for other people.
Definitely.